This morning, I'm talking about higher self-contact and leadership. This is for me, this is a very beautiful subject, very esoteric, and yet for some of us, it's going to be natural. The information, the content, even the experience will be natural to you. For those who are just opening up to the realization that there is a higher life in their consciousness, they're going to be excited about this. And so let me get started. Know this, that we are actually divided into two parts. There is a higher self that's within us, and then there is the lower self. The lower self is the self that is united with the physical, emotional, mental urges. And in the teaching, this is called the sleeping self. The higher self is the one who is watching us. The higher self is called by various names. For example, it is called the inner watch, the inner guide, the presence, the solar angel, the transpersonal self, and others. The higher self is an entity far advanced than our human being self, let's call it. Far advanced than our sleeping self. We are even told in the ageless wisdom that the higher self is an initiate of all degrees. Can you just imagine, and some of you I know have had this experience, but let's say that you have a first experience of contact with this higher part of yourself. What it must be. And I'm not going to tell you, what that is except in the talk this morning, but let that be part of your imagination, part of your thoughts in the next few days, that if you've not had that experience of making a direct contact with your higher self, this is going to be your future, an exciting future, a beautiful future, a purposeful future, and it will give you the sense of purpose of life. It's just so incredible. Perhaps the question we can ask ourselves is, how can I lead myself and others in a direction where we will all be in contact with the higher self? And here's the answer. One way is by serving and sacrificing for others. Now, if you're taking notes, these are 2 points that you can write down. The question, how can I lead myself and others in a direction where we'll all be in contact with the higher self? And the next point is to recognize an answer is by serving and sacrificing for others. So those are 2 points, to consider. When we start learning right human relations and we get closer to our higher self, it is then we slowly become a leader, a true leader. Not a leader that buys their way into a position, either through money or through family power and other avenues that seem to elevate people into roles of leadership that we would call pseudo-leadership. It's not that. It is when we become closer, move closer to the higher self, that is when we slowly become a leader, which means that through your frequency, through your influence, through your impression, you're going to be leading people to themselves, to their higher self. But first you have to have contact. See, that will gradually increase and be closer and closer and closer until, let's say, the frequency of your aura will be the same frequency as the higher self. Okay, what is sacrifice? I said one way is by serving and sacrificing for others. Sacrificing for others is a sign of the new discipleship. So this is another point that you might want to consider, that sacrificing for others is a sign of the new discipleship. I'm not going to go into talking this morning about the new discipleship because this is something I want to give more consideration to, but I'm very excited about it. You know, to think about the new discipleship. So discipleship is this: whatever I have, whatever I have had, whatever I know, whatever I can do is dedicated to the service of humanity, and it is consciously offered. I'm going to repeat this. Discipleship is whatever I have or have had, whatever I know, whatever I can do is dedicated to the service of humanity, and it is consciously offered. If you live a life of discipleship for only 2 or 3 lives, you will reach this high state of consciousness. A leader then is a true leader is one who is in contact with their higher self and knows how to lead others to their inner self, aka their higher self. So unless you yourself are in contact with your higher self, then you're not going to be able to lead others into contact with their higher self. Right? Doesn't that make sense? Okay. You cannot lead others into contact with their higher self because they are not going to understand what you are talking about. I know that might sound a bit odd, but the reason is that the first step such a leader takes is to put themselves in contact with their higher self. For their higher self has helped you find such a leader. Does that make sense to you? Once that contact is made, then the leader knows the direction to take those who are ready for such a contact. I don't think you get it. So let me repeat this. This is what happens. Okay. Let's say that you've had this experience now that you're in contact with your higher self. You've lived a life of discipleship for 2 or 3 lifetimes. Your leadership is increasing. Now you're at the point in your life where you want to sacrifice all that you have, all that you have had, all that you are, all that you know into service for humanity. And you're doing this consciously. This means in your leadership, you want to find others who are ready to take the next step the way you have taken that next step over the last 2 or 3 lifetimes. Okay, so now you, in your growing and unfolding leadership, are looking magnetically, you're going to be drawn to people who are preparing themselves, making themselves ready for contact with their higher self. In order for that to happen, you need to find a leader that is going to, a leader who is in contact with their higher self, that's going to put you in contact with your higher self. And the way that happens is that the higher self of the individual and the higher self of the leader will be in communication. In that communication, it's like a dream that you may have. And in that dream, someone tells you that you're going to meet someone that's going to be very important to you in your life. Now, it may not happen in a dream, it may happen in other ways. What's happening is that there is this phenomena that's taking place now between this true leader in contact with their higher self and your higher self, and a communication has started. I hope this helps. This step creates a communication between the higher self of the teacher and the student, between the disciple and the aspirant, between the initiate and the disciple. There are a number of steps that prepare us to make contact with the higher self. These steps are related to right human relations and group consciousness. For example, one of those steps is obedience. Oh dear. Obedience. Obedience, listen to this carefully. Obedience improves your willpower. So there's something else to put down in your notes. Obedience improves your willpower. Obedience to what? Obedience to higher principles. Now, this is a mystery. What are higher principles? So there's a seed thought, and I've been giving it a lot of thought. And the first thing that came to mind is your higher self is a higher principle. Your teacher is a higher principle. Obedience to higher principles. In such obedience, what are we going to demonstrate? See, if we're in the aura of a higher principle, we're going to learn endurance, stability, patience, courage, daring. And in so doing, these actions put us in contact with our own higher self. For example, when I was attending the University of Iowa, I had a taskmaster, actually 2 taskmasters, who took me under their wings to shape me into becoming a professional violinist. Both of these teachers required a lot from me. They presented me with tests where I learned willpower, endurance, stability, patience, courage, dedication, and striving, even daring in some cases. And through this whole process, including willpower, it helped me never to lose my sense of direction. I never turned left, I never turned right, I never turned around and headed back. I never lost my sense of direction because of those 2 higher principles that were in my life. So obedience improved my willpower, and the 2 teachers, through their insistence on me being obedient to their instruction, taught me the sense of direction. Now here's another way, number 2. To be in contact with your higher self, you must recognize the rights of other people and their work. Now, for some of us, you would say, well, of course, that's natural. Naturally, I would recognize the rights of others. Naturally, I'm going to recognize the work of others. But if you have vanity and ego, if you are buried in glamour and illusion and a maya, this is not going to apply to you. Because when you look outward, you're looking at a mirror, which only sees itself. But as you are moving in contact with the higher self, that's when you're going to recognize the rights of others, of other people and their work. You know, I can't begin to tell you, and I know I'm going to run over this morning. I love this subject. I'm so in love with it because it's important, you know, to our own life purpose. When, you know, my parents really supported my work with music, and they sacrificed themselves in so many ways to see that I had the best of the best, you know, instructors and opportunities. And I knew that, and I respected their sacrifice. And so I would have 2 violin lessons every single week with these magnificent university professors. And I would have sometimes an hour to 3 hours of a music lesson with each of them, depending on how much time they wanted to spend with me. The minute I walked out of their room, I would run down the hall, 3 flights down, run outside, 3 blocks over to where the music section was, all these buildings where we all practiced. We had to rent a room in one of these buildings so that we could practice our music. And I would run into my room, slam the door, sit down and start making notes. Everything that one or the other teacher taught me. And then I would sit there for another 2 or 3 hours, depending on my time, and practice every single thing that they told me. Every single thing. That's dedication, that's striving, that's courage, that's concentration, that's focus, that's respect. I didn't walk out of that room and say, man, I want to go play. And it wasn't that I never thought that, because I did. But the willpower kicked in. And the respect for those that were giving their time to help me, they caused me to have humility. And that humility still stays with me today, because I have so much gratitude for those that were in contact with their higher self, that put me in contact and opened up a world that so many people don't even know exists. So it is very important to develop the equality of seeing the value in others and to appreciate them and to respect them. You will not only learn to, but it soon becomes just a part of your nature to respect the right of others. Of course, you're going to develop a finer consciousness in order to see the rights of others. This means to see the rights of their existence, their freedom, their joy, and so forth. This concept can also work in politics. I truly believe that not only in the future, but I truly believe that now there are some politicians coming forward to show us that they have a respect for the rights of others. You know, it's still a dribble. But once that dribble picks up, you know, with energy and dedication, it's magnetically going to draw other people into the field of politics and say, yeah, I can make a difference. I may not be from the Kennedy family, but I have power through my inspiration, and that inspiration comes from the higher self. And they are pulled into the field of politics, which is so important to the vitality and life and sustenance of any country, because it's the politicians that make the decisions for our future. In the United Nations, there is a Bill of Human Rights. Yet how many politicians today are honoring it? When the new disciples assume high positions, they will respect human rights from A to Z. People will no longer be able to say, for example, that black people have no rights because they're black. This respect of others' rights, appreciation, and recognition comes when you are in contact with your higher self. Otherwise, you do not have these qualities. You may pretend, but when it comes down to the wire, it's lost. Number 3, the recognition of the divine presence living in one another. No matter what people are, there is a divine presence in them, no matter what. This is not so easy to do, but if you want to remain in contact with your higher self, this is what you must do to recognize the divine presence living in others. Even when they manipulate you, even when they slander you, even when they belittle you, even when they lie to others about you, you must stay steady and recognizing that there is a divine presence living in them. Your duty is to find a way to reflect the divine presence in them, and thus putting them in contact with their higher self, even if it is just momentary. It will give them a glimpse into their divinity. Number 4, getting closer to your higher self causes you to take steps to challenge people, to demonstrate and manifest the potentials latent within them. Let me just repeat myself. Getting closer to your higher self, where you are now increasing in your leadership. You haven't bought your way into a leadership role. You have naturally, through your striving and spiritual unfolding, now you are moving closer and closer into, let's say, the presence or the aura of the higher self. Now you're going to start taking steps to challenge people, to demonstrate and manifest the potentials they have buried within them. You can inspire them and encourage them. You can naturally and always present a challenge for them. You can, but see, if they're not ready, if they, how can I say this? It's like if there is no communication between yourself and your higher self, then when that leader challenges you, you're going to deny it. See, because you're still immersed in the little self, that lower self, that other part of your being. But you can try and bring forth the potentials from them so that you yourself increase. You yourself increase. Your group increases. And humanity increases in value. Each of us, so you see, it's like I go back to the university when, I started playing the violin and the piano when I was 3 years old. I had teachers all the way through grade school and junior high and high school. These teachers were preparing me, making me ready. And I wanted to be prepared. I wanted to be ready. See, so it doesn't just happen. So sometimes I say I was just born into being obedient to a teacher. It was so natural for me. I didn't have resistance. And that was a gift, I think, that I was born with. Not all of us have that gift. But having such a gift, what it does, it allows others to open that treasury that is hidden within us. So many times we say, no, I can't do that, I can't do that, I cannot, and I do not want to do that. So you're locking that treasury. Each of us, within each of us, is a large locked treasury. There is so much beauty and talent and potential in you. Who's going to unlock these treasures that are within you? If you are jealous or afraid, you cannot do this. If you are hating, you cannot do it. If you are slanderous and revengeful, you cannot do it. But if you can unlock this treasury, it means that you are closer to your higher self. And you will want to see beauty in everyone, and you're going to want to increase beauty in the world. In this new age, this Aquarian age, people are going to think, the more people become wealthy and prosperous, then the more I am going to enjoy my life. It is not good to enjoy life when everyone around you is sick and poor. You know, when you go to countries where the religious leader of that country is living in a mansion with gold dripping from the ceilings and the fixtures, and they're eating off of gold, while their people are living in poverty around and about them. See, that's not New Age. It is not good to enjoy a life when others around you are sick and poor. Number 5, a person who comes closer to their higher self protects others, even if it means endangering their own life. They also protect people from themselves. They protect others from enemies. They protect them from their own ignorance, or at least they try. They protect them from inner confusion. They protect them from falling into self-deception. But once again, you can't protect a person who is not willing to be protected yet. From the discipleship sense of point of view. So here's a story. Many years ago, I went to California to attend a celebration responding to an invitation from my spiritual teacher. I had to travel across country to attend this celebration dinner and seminar. He placed me at the head table with a person who had been slandering me for several years. And this person was a former teacher of mine. He had placed me in the chair right next to himself, so that each time the slanderer looked at him, she had to see me as well, for I was in her line of vision. The energy crossing back and forth between my teacher and the slanderer was like a laser beam that could cut through anything. It was not long before the person stood up, excused herself, and left the celebration. After she left, my teacher leaned over and whispered in my ear, saying, "She will never slander you again." And he was right. I saw him protect me many times in many ways, and I'm sure in ways of which that I was not aware. I would often think of him, and still do, as my ring of fire. In other words, my protector. Do we protect each other? When someone gossips or slanders another, do you protect the person who is being slandered? Or do you say something that appears that you are in agreement? You may suddenly become aware of your higher self, and in that awareness, say, I'm going to protect those who are under attack, whether they are right or wrong. This is another way of protection. Number 6, a person who is consciously standing in the light of their higher self is very careful and discriminating about what they hear and see. This means think for yourself. Think for yourself and see what is your conclusion. You must be very careful and discriminating about what you hear and see. In other words, stop and think. You must develop a state of mind which does not believe in the wholesale things that people tell us. There's a lot of conspiracy theories in the media, especially since 9/11, that seem to make sense yet go against reality, go against facts, go against truth. They serve a subtle message, these conspiracy theories. They serve a subtle message which turns us against the securities of government and the country. So many stories are fabricated. So stop and think. Number 7, do only your own duty and responsibility. This piece of advice is found in the book Challenge for Discipleship by Torgrim Serdarian. He says, don't step in and take over the duties and responsibilities of others and interfere with their dharma. Let their higher self inspire them with a sense of responsibility, willpower, endurance, stability, patience, courage, dedication, and striving, so they will not lose their sense of direction. Now I'm paraphrasing, this is not a direct quote, but the direct quote is, do only your own duty and responsibility. This is so important. If you try to step in and do their duty and take on their responsibilities, you know what happens? I see this, so I know it to be so, is that they make themselves dependent on you and will eventually find themselves losing their will and giving their will over to you. In the Bhagavad Gita, it says, do only your own duty and don't engage yourself in doing the duty of others. For example, your nose does not hear, and your ears do not smell. Sometimes in groups, the nose starts doing the work of the head, and everything becomes distorted and confused. Sometimes people pretend to be the leader, and because of their magnetism, they are followed. And just like the Pied Piper, they induce others to follow them and take them away from their duties and responsibilities, where they eventually lose their sense of direction. If you are a leader who is in contact with the higher self, you must put every person in their right place. The leadership must be very intelligent to do this. In group formation, the leader must be very strict and put everyone in the right place. If people are not in their right places, those in the wrong places can be real headaches. And others cannot easily clean those headaches. One of the jobs of a leader is to put people in the right place. The leader is also going to be in his or her right place. If the leader is not in the right place, then everyone is going to be in the wrong place. I could talk for an hour about this, just that one paragraph, but I won't. So you can think about it. Number 8, try to be a conscious part of a group unit. Ask, is this my duty? Do your duty perfectly and know why you are doing that duty and for what reasons. Do your part consciously and not mechanically. Number 9, be obedient to your higher self. Number 10, be obedient to your teacher who is introduced to you by your higher self. Once you find your teacher, that person will cooperate with your higher self and make you ready to be not only part of an earth plane group, but also a part of an ashram that functions in the higher planes. So I hope this is going to give you a sense of value of being in contact with the higher self. I have a couple of minutes here. I can share a story. Over the last, 2 or 3 years, I've been going to the Nicholas Rourke Museum in New York City and spending many, many hours in their archives, reading about and coughing and sneezing in the dust. About the early members of the Agni Yoga Society. Some of those early members were part of the original group that organized around Nicholas and Helena Rourke. It's so inspiring to read their stories. It puts us back in contact with people who didn't know about social media, the internet, and so many things that we have as a humanity and as a community of disciples have lost sight of. This is not to say that they were sweet peas and that they were pushovers and that they were passive men and women. They were anything but that. They were strongly empowered. But they were empowered by the influence of the master and the master's disciples and initiates, so that they were being pulled from remaining an ordinary, stupid human being, having the treasury unlocked within them. That fire, was being released. And they had to learn how to get along with one another. That was the first thing. They were like this, some of them. And of course, when I first started reading about these things, I was shocked because I thought that they would be goody two-shoes, that they were going to be just like roses, each of them with beautiful fragrances. Well, they were beautiful and are. And so in our recent conference, I was able to show a video of 3 of those original members, or early members, when they were in their late 90s. and to still see how devoted and how dedicated they were to Agni Yoga and how much they loved one another. And one of them was one of those really ornery people that was now so full of love. I couldn't believe it. So she went through that whole transforming process. See, when the fire was burning up the ego and the glamours and the illusions and so forth, until when she passed, she was like a rose. She was so beautiful. So you can read Agni Yoga Quarterly about some of the writings and the lectures and the experiences of some of these early members, and maybe that will re-inspire you or get you back on track or put you on track, to what it means to be on this path of the ageless wisdom, the Agni Yoga teachings. It's not an easy path, but boy, is it worth it. Okay, so I'm done.